She was dining alone when a man sat down and said, "Pretend you're my wife, please." Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The rain had just stopped over downtown Chicago, leaving the city glowing under 1,000 streetlights. Inside an elegant restaurant on the corner of Lake Street, the low hum of jazz blended with the soft clinking of glasses. Ella Brooks sat alone by the window, pushing a slice of bread across her plate. She had come here for one reason: to use the gift card her late mother had given her before passing away. It was supposed to expire tonight, and she could not afford to waste even a single dollar. Her dress was simple, her shoes scuffed from long shifts at the diner she had just lost. The people around her looked polished, wealthy, and distant. She glanced at the menu again, pretending to study it so no one would notice she was alone. The waiter poured her water and left with a polite nod. Ella exhaled softly, whispering to herself, "Just finish dinner, and then you can disappear." That was when it happened. A man in a charcoal suit entered the restaurant, tall, confident, the kind of presence that turned heads without effort. His tie was slightly undone, his jaw tense. He scanned the room as if searching for someone, then, without hesitation, walked straight to Ella's table and sat down opposite her. Before she could even react, he leaned forward and whispered urgently, his voice low and controlled. "Pretend you're my wife, please." Ella froze. Her fork slipped from her hand and clattered against the plate. "I am sorry." "What?" she stammered, eyes wide. He kept his gaze steady, his words clipped and desperate. "Please, just for a few minutes. My mother just walked in. If she sees me alone again, she will start another scene. I will explain later, I promise." Ella turned slightly and saw an elegant older woman near the entrance, scanning the room with sharp eyes. The man's hands were trembling ever so slightly, though he tried to hide it. He looked powerful, but also human, vulnerable in a way that made her chest tighten. "I will pay you for the trouble," he added quickly. "Please, just smile. That is all I need." Her heart raced. Every instinct told her to stand up and walk away. But the exhaustion in his voice and maybe the faint kindness in his eyes made her hesitate. Against all logic, she nodded once. "Fine," she whispered. "But just for tonight." Relief washed over his face as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small gold ring. He slid it across the table. "Put this on your left hand," he murmured. Ella stared at it for a second, then slipped it onto her finger. The cool metal fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting there all along. The man leaned back, his posture softening as the older woman approached. "Adrian," the woman greeted with a proud smile. "And this must be your wife." Ella's throat went dry. Adrian. So that was his name. He reached across the table and took her hand, squeezing gently. "Yes, mother," he said smoothly. "This is Ella." For the next few minutes, she played along, answering polite questions and smiling when needed. Adrian's mother seemed charmed, though her eyes lingered on Ella's simple dress with quiet curiosity. When the woman finally excused herself to greet another guest, Ella released a shaky breath. "What just happened?" she whispered. Adrian's faint smile returned, tinged with guilt. "You saved me from an argument that would have lasted an hour. I owe you more than dinner." Ella raised an eyebrow. "You think you can buy your way out of this with dessert?" He chuckled quietly. "I think I can try." She tried not to laugh, but the absurdity of it all broke through her guard. For the first time in weeks, she smiled without forcing it. Yet as she looked at the gold ring glinting on her finger, a strange thought crept in: this man might be trouble. And she was right. Because that single night, what began as a harmless act of pretending, would soon turn into a contract neither of them could escape and a love story neither expected to find. The next morning, sunlight poured through the small window of Ella's apartment, falling across stacks of unpaid bills and a suitcase she never had time to unpack. She sat at her kitchen table, staring at the gold ring still on her finger. It looked surreal now, out of place in her modest world of chipped mugs and secondhand furniture. She had promised herself she would return it after last night, but part of her hesitated. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Miss Brooks?" The voice on the other end was deep, steady, unmistakably familiar. "This is Adrian Cole." Her breath caught. "How did you?" "You left your scarf at the restaurant," he interrupted. Polite but direct. "I would like to return it to you. Could we meet at noon?" "Same place." She hesitated, glancing at the small pile of envelopes marked final notice. She needed to drop off job applications that morning, but something about his tone, controlled yet gentle, made it hard to say no. "At noon," she replied quietly. When she arrived, the restaurant looked even more polished in daylight. Adrian was already there, seated by the window. The suit was gone. Today he wore a plain gray sweater and slacks, but he still carried that quiet authority that made him stand out from every other man in the room. "Thank you for coming," he said as she sat. "And for last night, you saved me more than you know." "I should charge for acting lessons," she replied, crossing her arms. "Your mother is intimidating. It is level getting 4 CS to DACC downhead of competence." He chuckled, but there was a trace of weariness behind it. "She can be. She has been worried about me since my father passed. I was supposed to bring someone to the family gala next month, and well now she thinks she has met my wife." Ella blinked. "Excuse me?" He leaned forward. "Miss Brooks, I need a favor. I need you to keep pretending just for a few weeks. Attend a few events with me. After that we part ways, and you will be well compensated." She stared at him, stunned. "You cannot be serious." "I am," he said simply. "My board expects stability, and my family expects tradition. You helped me once. I am asking you again. There will be a contract, clear terms, no misunderstanding. We get it other bag less, we say get on Fongzer." She opened her mouth to refuse, but he slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a cashier's check, an amount that made her heart skip. It was enough to clear her debts, pay rent for 6 months, maybe even enroll in art school again. "I do not want your money," she said finally, voice low. "But I could use a second chance." Adrian nodded. "Then take it as that." 2 days later, she found herself standing in a suite at the Fairmont Hotel, surrounded by clothes that looked too expensive to touch. Adrian's assistant, a woman named Claire, moved briskly between garment racks. "We have fittings today and etiquette rehearsal tonight," she said. "Mr. Cole will meet you later to sign the agreement." The agreement. The words echoed in Ella's mind as she looked at her reflection in the mirror. The stylist pinned her hair into a soft bun and draped her in a pale blue gown that shimmered under the lights. For the first time in years, she saw not the tired waitress from the diner, but someone different, someone capable of belonging in his world. When Adrian arrived that evening, the transformation made him pause. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, with a faint smile, "You look perfect." Ella shifted awkwardly. "I look like I am about to lie to an entire city." He handed her a folder. "You will not be lying. You will be helping me maintain order until I finalize a merger. This contract just ensures both of us are protected." She flipped through the pages, reading aloud the conditions. 1 month. Attend 5 official events. No press interviews. No public affection unless necessary. And, she stopped, frowning. No falling in love. His expression softened. "It is just a clause to keep things simple." "Right," she murmured. "Simple." She signed anyway, her hand trembling slightly. Over the next week, life became a blur of lessons and rehearsals. Claire coached her on how to walk beside him, how to hold a champagne glass, when to speak and when to smile. Each night, Ella returned home exhausted but strangely alive. Adrian kept his distance, professional but kind, often leaving small gestures that surprised her: a cup of coffee waiting after rehearsal, a note reminding her to rest. The first event came sooner than expected, a charity dinner at the Lakeshore Pavilion. The city skyline glittered behind glass walls as they entered arm in arm. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and Adrian's hand rested lightly on her back, steady and reassuring. "You will be fine," he whispered. "Just remember what we practiced." She nodded, heart pounding. Inside, guests turned, curious about the mysterious woman beside the billionaire CEO. Someone muttered her name incorrectly, but Adrian corrected them gently. "It is Ella," he said with quiet pride. When his mother approached, Ella smiled and greeted her warmly. The older woman seemed pleased, perhaps even proud. For a fleeting second, Ella forgot the act and believed the warmth was real. As the night went on, Adrian and Ella moved like a team, polite laughter, shared glances, easy rhythm. When the final toast was raised, he leaned close and murmured, "You did beautifully." She smiled, unsure if it was gratitude or something deeper blooming inside her. And for the first time, she wondered whether the boundary between pretending and feeling was already beginning to blur. 2 weeks passed in a rhythm Ella had never known before. Her days began with fittings, etiquette lessons, and meetings with people whose lives seemed written in silver and glass. Every evening ended beside Adrian, smiling under chandeliers, pretending to be his wife while strangers whispered about how perfect they looked together. At first, she thought she could keep her heart steady. It was supposed to be business, an agreement with clear boundaries. But as each event passed, the lines between duty and feeling blurred. Adrian was not just the billionaire with a calm voice and perfect posture. When no one was watching, he carried quiet sadness in his eyes, a loneliness that mirrored her own. One night after another formal dinner, the driver dropped them off at his penthouse instead of her apartment. The city stretched wide and glowing beyond the glass windows. Ella followed him onto the balcony, the air cool against her skin. He loosened his tie, silent for a long time. "You did well tonight," he said finally. She smiled faintly. "That almost sounds like a compliment." He glanced at her, a small spark of amusement breaking through his usual composure. "It is. My mother thinks you bring me luck. The board likes you too much." "Luck," she repeated softly. "That is a first for me." Adrian turned toward her. "You do not see yourself clearly, Ella. You think you are pretending to belong, but you fit better than anyone I have ever met." His words caught her off guard. She laughed, nervous. "Careful, Mr. Cole. That almost sounds personal." He smiled, but there was something else behind it, something fragile. "Maybe it is." Silence settled between them. The city lights shimmered below, and for a moment, Ella forgot every rule in their contract. She forgot about debts and lies and just stood there, close enough to feel the warmth from his shoulder. Later that night, she found a small box waiting outside her guest room door. Inside was a pair of earrings, simple pearls, elegant and understated. A note rested beside them in his handwriting. "For tomorrow's charity gala, you deserve to shine." The next evening, she wore them. As they walked into the gala, flashes from cameras followed them again. The event was louder, brighter, more public than any before. Adrian's hand brushed hers as they posed for photographs, his fingers lingering a second longer than necessary. But the night took an unexpected turn when a woman in a red dress approached, elegant, confident, and unmistakably familiar with Adrian. "Adrian," she said smoothly, "it has been a long time." His voice stiffened. "Melissa." Ella recognized the tension instantly. The woman's gaze shifted toward her, sharp and assessing. "So this is your wife? I must say, you moved on quickly." Ella forced a polite smile, unsure what to say. Adrian stepped closer to her, his tone calm but firm. "Yes, she is my wife, and I am very lucky to have her." The woman's eyes flickered with surprise, then amusement. "Of course you are." She turned away, leaving the scent of expensive perfume in her wake. When she was gone, Ella looked up at him. "Ex-girlfriend? Something like that," he replied quietly. "Someone who loved the idea of me more than the man himself." She studied his face, the flicker of regret, the weight of past wounds he rarely spoke about. "And now?" she asked gently. "Do you still believe pretending fixes anything?" They settled way for Mound. It had to get a ride. He met her eyes, his voice low. "No, not anymore." For a long moment, neither moved. The music softened, the crowd faded into the background. His hand brushed against hers again, not for show this time, but out of something real. And though neither of them said it aloud, they both knew that what began as a lie was slowly becoming the truth. The following week brought a chill wind through the city, and with it came a change that neither of them could ignore. The contract still had 2 weeks left, but both Adrian and Ella could feel that something deeper had begun. The pretense no longer felt like performance. It felt like breathing. One afternoon, after a long meeting at the Cole Foundation, Adrian asked her to stay. The office was quiet, the skyline stretched in pale winter light. He stood by the window, hands in his pockets, his reflection sharp against the glass. "I used to think control was everything," he said quietly. "Every move, every plan. But since you walked into that restaurant, I have done nothing but lose control." Ella froze. Adrian. He turned to face her, his tone calm but unguarded. I meant what I said that night. You make me see myself differently. Not as the CEO everyone expects, but as a man who wants something real. She looked at him, unsure whether to speak or run. Her heart pounded, not from fear but from recognition. You promise no feelings, she whispered. He smiled sadly. I break promises when they stop making sense. Before she could answer, Claire entered the room, her voice urgent. Mr. Cole, there is a problem. Someone from the press got a copy of the contract. The words hit like cold water. Ella's stomach turned. The contract? How? We do not know yet, Claire said, glancing between them. But they are threatening to publish it by morning. Adrian's expression hardened. Get our legal team on it. No one outside this office sees that file. When Claire left, Ella spoke first. If this comes out, it will destroy your reputation. It's the rest again. He looked at her with a mixture of guilt and determination. Then we will deny it. I will protect you. Her voice shook. By lying again? The silence that followed felt heavier than the glass walls around them. That night, Ella could not sleep. She replayed every moment they had shared, the laughter, the glances, the small acts of kindness, and realized that even if it had all started as an arrangement, she had fallen for him completely. But love built on secrecy could not last. The next morning, headlines hit every screen. Billionaire's fake marriage exposed. Cameras crowded outside the Cole building, and social media burned with speculation. Adrian stormed through the lobby, his jaw tight, his phone buzzing nonstop. When he reached Ella's apartment that evening, she was already packing. Do not, he said firmly. Do not leave. I have to, she replied softly. You needed someone to play a role. I did that. But if I stay now, I will only make things worse for you. He stepped closer, frustration breaking through his calm. You think I care about that? Ella, I care about you. Tears blurred her vision. Then why does it hurt so much to hear it? She handed him the gold ring he had given her that first night. You told me to pretend. I did. But I cannot pretend anymore. In free man. Before he could stop her, she walked out, her footsteps fading down the hall. That evening, Adrian sat alone in his office, staring at the empty space where she used to sit beside him. For the first time in years, the city felt silent. The headlines no longer mattered. The empire no longer mattered. He had built everything on logic and control until a woman who owned nothing walked in and showed him what it meant to lose everything that was not love. Days turned into weeks, and the city moved on, but Adrian Cole did not. Every morning the news spoke of market recoveries and new mergers, but none of it mattered. He went to work, he signed papers, he smiled for cameras, yet every night he found himself staring at the same gold ring lying on his desk, the one Ella had left behind. He had tried to fix the scandal, but the damage was deeper than headlines. His board questioned his judgment. His mother stopped speaking to him. What hurt most, however, was the silence from Ella. She had vanished from the city, leaving behind no trace except her name written in a contract that meant nothing anymore. One late evening, as the rain tapped softly against the windows, Claire entered his office holding a thin folder. We found the leak, she said. It was Marcus from legal. He sold the document to a rival firm trying to discredit you before the merger. Adrian closed his eyes, anger rising and then fading into exhaustion. Fire him. Press charges if you have to. Claire hesitated. You could still fix this, sir. Tell the truth. The public will forgive a man who falls in love. He looked up sharply. She will not believe me. Then make her believe, Claire said quietly, and left the room. That night, Adrian made a decision. He drafted a public statement, not through lawyers or advisors, but in his own words. The next morning, he stood before a room full of reporters and flashing cameras. Yes, he said calmly, the contract was real. It began as an arrangement to protect my family's reputation. But what began as pretend became the most honest thing I have ever known. I hurt someone who did not deserve it. Her name is Ella Brooks, and if she is watching, this is me asking for a chance to make it right. The room fell silent. His voice did not shake once. By that evening, the video had gone viral. Millions of people watched as the powerful billionaire admitted his mistake in front of the world. Some called it reckless, others called it brave. But one person sat in a small cafe on the edge of the city, tears in her eyes, watching the same clip over and over. Ella did not plan to go back. but her heart refused to stay away. The next morning, she took the first train into downtown. The moment she stepped off the platform, she saw the same car waiting by the curb, the one that used to take her to every event. Adrian was standing beside it, no suit this time, just a simple coat and tired eyes. When he saw her, he let out a breath he did not know he was holding. "I was not sure you would come," he said. "I was not sure either," she replied softly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "It is another contract," he said with a faint smile. "Only one clause this time." She unfolded it. In neat handwriting it read, "Stay if you love me." For a moment the world around them disappeared. Ella looked up, tears catching in the morning light. "You really cannot write a normal love letter, can you?" He laughed, relief breaking through his composure. "No, I guess I am still learning." She stepped closer, placed her hand on his chest, and whispered, "Then let us learn together." He took her hand, slipped the gold ring back where it belonged, and kissed her forehead gently. That evening, under the same soft rain that had once brought them together, they stood side by side, not pretending this time, not acting for anyone else. Just a man and a woman who had broken every rule to find something real. And when Adrian finally said, "Welcome home, Mrs. Cole," the world seemed to pause, as if even the city knew that this love, born from a lie, had become the truth. The following months unfolded quietly, nothing like the chaos that had once surrounded them. The headlines faded, the noise disappeared, and for the first time, Adrian and Ella were simply two people learning how to live without pretending. They moved into a townhouse near the lake, far from the glass towers and the constant rush of the business world. Mornings were slow and peaceful. Ella made coffee while Adrian read the paper, often forgetting to turn the pages because he was watching her instead. Sometimes he would slip behind her and whisper, "I still cannot believe you stayed." She would smile, stirring sugar into her cup. "I stayed because you stopped pretending first." Adrian had changed in ways even he could not explain. The man who once measured success in numbers now cared about small, ordinary things. How her laughter filled the kitchen, how the smell of rain reminded him of that first night, how silence no longer felt lonely when she was near. But peace was never permanent for long. One morning, as Ella returned from the community arts center where she had started volunteering, she found Adrian standing on the porch, holding an envelope. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of something unspoken. "What is that?" she asked. He handed it to her. "An invitation. The annual Cole Foundation Gala. They want us there. The same event where everything began." Ella hesitated. "Do you want to go?" "I think I need to," he said. "Not as the man who lied, but as the man who learned." She nodded slowly. "Then we go together." The night of the gala arrived with glittering lights and murmured anticipation. The same ballroom that had once felt cold and distant now shimmered with warmth. As they entered, heads turned. But this time, there was no whisper of scandal, only curiosity and respect. Adrian guided her through the crowd, greeting familiar faces. When his mother appeared, Ella braced herself. The older woman studied her for a long moment, then smiled gently. "I was wrong about you," she said. "You were never pretending. You were saving him." Ella blinked back tears. "We saved each other." When the orchestra began to play, Adrian took Ella's hand and led her onto the dance floor. The melody was soft, timeless. They moved together as if the world had always been waiting for this one moment. He leaned close, whispering, "Remember the first time we danced?" "We never danced," she said with a laugh. He smiled. "Then let this be the first time for real. Is now Dillis's passe post, could in laying one of film, is playman to Dayton." They swayed under the chandelier's glow, surrounded by the same people who once doubted them. Yet, none of it mattered. The only truth was the warmth between them, the way her hand fit perfectly in his. When the song ended, applause rose around them. Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. The room quieted as he opened it, revealing a simple ring with a single diamond. "This time," he said softly, "no contracts, no pretending, just love, if you will have it." Ella's breath caught. "After everything, you still think I would say no?" He smiled. "I was hoping you would not." She nodded, tears shining. "Yes, Adrian, I will. With 3. The crowd erupted in applause, but they barely heard it. In that moment, the noise, the lights, and the years of pretending melted away. What remained was real two hearts that had found their way back to truth. As the night carried on, Adrian whispered, "Do you realize we are back where it all started?" Ella looked around the ballroom, then back at him. "Maybe we are," she said softly, "but this time, it feels like home." And when they kissed, under the same golden light that had once witnessed a lie, it finally witnessed the truth. The months that followed the gala felt like a new beginning. Ella and Adrian married quietly at a small garden behind his mother's house, surrounded only by a few close friends and the soft scent of blooming jasmine. There were no reporters, no contracts, no staged smiles, just two people finally at peace with the truth. Life between them was no longer built on performance. Adrian learned how to leave his phone in another room during dinner, and Ella learned how to trust that love did not have to vanish when life became ordinary. She had turned her passion for art into a small studio downtown, where she taught painting to children and older women who had never been given the chance to create. Adrian often stopped by unannounced, sleeves rolled up, carrying coffee for her and the students. One afternoon, while she was locking up the studio, a familiar face appeared: Melissa, the woman in the red dress who had once tried to expose their secret. Her expression was softer now, her voice quieter. "Ella," she said, "I came to apologize. I did not understand then, but I do now. You really do love him." Ella smiled gently. "I do. And I think he needed all the mistakes to find something right." Melissa nodded and left, leaving Ella with the strange sense that the last page of their old story had finally turned. That evening, she returned home to find Adrian sitting on the porch steps, his tie loosened, the sunset spilling gold across his shoulders. "You are late," he said, though his tone was teasing. "I was forgiving someone," she replied, sitting beside him. "It felt good." He smiled, watching the fading light. "You know, I used to think success was about being the best. Now I realize it is about being grateful. You taught me that." Ella leaned against him. "And you taught me that love can begin in the most impossible place." They sat in silence, the sound of waves drifting from the nearby lake. For a man who once measured every second, Adrian now seemed content to let time slip by without notice. Later that week, the Cole Foundation held a charity event to support community art programs. Ella's paintings were displayed across the ballroom, their colors warm and hopeful. When Adrian took the stage to speak, he introduced her first. "This," he said, looking toward her, "is the woman who taught me that real strength comes from kindness. She was once the stranger who saved me from my own pride." Applause filled the hall. Ella stood near the back, her heart swelling as she watched him speak, not as a businessman protecting an image, but as a man who had finally found his purpose. After the speech, he joined her, whispering, "Did I embarrass you?" She laughed softly. "Only a little." He reached for her hand. "Good, because I am planning to embarrass you for the rest of our lives." Her smile lingered as they stepped outside into the cool night air. The city shimmered, alive but calm, no longer a backdrop for lies or fear. As they walked toward their car, Ella looked up at the stars and said, "It still feels unreal sometimes." Adrian squeezed her hand. "That is how you know it is real. Is the Dokkinen aid Tess. Dalaming is with that." And as they drove away, the gold ring on her finger caught the light, gleaming like the promise they had both fought so hard to keep, a promise no longer written on paper, but etched into their lives forever. Spring arrived early that year, painting Chicago in soft gold light and bursts of magnolia. Ella's studio had grown into a local haven for young artists, and every wall was now filled with paintings that told stories of struggle and second chances. She often said that art was not about perfection, but about honesty, a lesson she had learned the hard way. Adrian, meanwhile, had stepped down from his position as chief executive officer of Cole Enterprises. The board had protested at first, but he made it clear that it was time for a new chapter. "I built a company," he told them, "but now I want to build a life." His focus shifted to the Cole Foundation, where he and Ella worked side by side to create scholarships for underprivileged youth. For the first time, his name in the news was not tied to scandal or power, but to generosity. One morning, Ella arrived at the foundation office to find Adrian in the conference room, sleeves rolled up, surrounded by sketches and blueprints. "What are you working on now?" she asked. He smiled. "A community center. Art classes, job training, a garden. A place for anyone who feels invisible. This went for, and we're want to thing, and liver come. Her heart swelled with pride. That sounds beautiful. He looked up at her. It is called the Brooks Center. After you. She froze. Adrian, you cannot do that. Yes, I can, he said gently. Because this started with you. A woman who believed one small act of kindness could change everything. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not argue. Instead, she reached for his hand and whispered, "Then let us build it together." That evening, they walked through the empty lot that would soon become the center. The air smelled like rain, and the sky glowed pink with the promise of a new season. Adrian pointed toward the corner where the main hall would stand. Right there, he said, we will have an art gallery for your students. And over there, Ella added, we will plant magnolias so that no one forgets to look for beauty. He smiled. You are already thinking like a founder. She laughed softly. Maybe because I finally believe I belong. Weeks passed, and the project came to life. Construction crews worked from dawn until dusk, and soon, the Brooks Center stood tall, a place built from redemption and love. On opening day, the community gathered under bright banners and soft music. Children ran through the courtyard, their laughter echoing off the new walls. As the ceremony began, Adrian stood beside Ella, both of them dressed simply, no spotlight needed. When it was her turn to speak, Ella's voice trembled at first, but then grew steady. A year ago, I was just a waitress sitting alone at a restaurant, wondering how I would survive another week. I did not know that one stranger, one moment, would change everything. This place exists because kindness has power. It begins small, but it never ends small. Applause erupted, but Adrian was not looking at the crowd. He was looking at her, at the woman who had turned his world inside out and rebuilt it with compassion. When the ribbon was cut, he leaned close and whispered, "Do you remember that first night?" She smiled. "The dinner that started it all?" He nodded. "You thought I was crazy." "I still do," she said, laughing softly. "But I guess your kind of crazy saved us both." He brushed his thumb across her wedding ring. "And now, it belongs to the world too." As the sun dipped low behind the new center, they stood hand in hand, surrounded by people whose lives were about to change just as theirs once had. The past no longer haunted them. It had become the foundation beneath their feet, strong and steady, built on the truth they had fought to find. A year later, the Brooks Center had become the heart of the neighborhood. The walls that once echoed with hammering and paint now rang with laughter, piano notes, and the sound of dreams being born. Every weekend, children filled the art room, and young adults came to learn trades, design, and business skills. What began as a dream on paper had turned into something living, breathing, and full of hope. Ella walked through the main hall, stopping to fix a painting that one of her students had hung crookedly. It was a portrait of a woman holding an umbrella under the rain. A simple image, yet it reminded her of that night years ago when a stranger had asked her to pretend. She smiled to herself. "Funny how pretending became everything real," she whispered. Outside, the sky had turned gold with the afternoon sun. Adrian was waiting by the garden, where magnolias bloomed exactly as she had imagined. He had just finished helping a group of volunteers plant new flowers. His sleeves were rolled up, dirt on his hands, a quiet smile on his face. "You are supposed to be the guest of honor, not the gardener," Ella teased, walking toward him. He looked up, wiping his hands on a towel. "I like it better this way. Keeps me grounded, literally," she laughed, resting her head against his shoulder. "Do you ever think about how far we have come?" "Every day," he said softly. "Sometimes I still see that girl sitting alone in a restaurant window, pretending not to care, and I still see the man who thought love was just another deal to sign." Ella looked up at him, eyes shining. "And now?" "Now," he said, touching her face gently. "I know love is the only thing that does not need signatures or contracts. It just needs courage." They stood together as families began arriving for the evening celebration, the first anniversary of the Brooks Center. A string quartet played softly while guests mingled and children chased bubbles across the courtyard. Adrian stepped to the microphone to speak, his voice calm and full of warmth. "A year ago, this place was nothing but an empty lot and a wild idea. Today, it is proof that second chances can change everything. I would not have built any of this without my wife Ella. She believed when I could not. She taught me that honesty is the greatest wealth a person can have. Applause filled the air, but Adrian turned to her and spoke quietly enough that only she could hear. You gave me more than love. You gave me purpose. Ella's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of gratitude. And you gave me a home where I never thought I belonged. The crowd continued to cheer as the lights came on across the garden. Fireflies sparkled between the trees, and the scent of magnolias drifted through the air. Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a folded piece of paper, creased from years of keeping. It is the first contract we ever signed, he said, smiling. I kept it to remind me where we started. Ella opened it, reading the words she remembered so well. No love, no emotions. Business only. She looked up, her voice breaking into laughter. I guess we broke every rule. And thank heaven we did, he whispered. As the night deepened, they danced under the string lights, surrounded by the people they had helped, by the lives they had touched, by the future they had built together. The past no longer felt heavy. It had turned into the story that made them who they were. When the music softened, Adrian kissed her forehead and said, For a man who once lived by contracts, this is the only promise I will ever need to love you, every ordinary day. Ella smiled through her tears. And I promise to remind you that real love never has terms. The camera would have pulled back then, if anyone were filming, showing the glowing garden, the magnolias in bloom, and the couple who had once pretended for a night but found forever instead. Because in the end, what began as a lie became the truest thing either of them had ever known.